listening to the ProgAxia podcast.
Programs usually seen at this time will not be shown tonight in order to bring you this special program.
1971.
Hi, welcome to the ProgAxia podcast. I'm Andy Phillips and I'm with Paul Guter. Hi, Paul. How you doing?
Hey, really good. Great to be here. Thanks, Andy.
This is our first podcast together, and we're going to be doing quite a few of these. Today, we're going to be looking at a radio show that I did for the Rockin' Rebel radio show, and we did what I did. I'm doing everything in 1970. I'm doing a radio show for every year of 1970 because it's such a massive decade for prog, isn't it?
It is. I mean, so many great albums. We're going to cover just some of them today. And I think a really important year. You know, prog was just finding its feet. And I think there's a bunch of really important albums. May not have been the band's best, but they had to be made to take them to where they were going to next. So fantastic year. Wish I'd have been part of it.
Yeah, I think one of the things we've got to say is that I don't know about you, but I really was nowhere near prog in 1970. I was 11 years old. And so a lot of the stuff that we talk about now, we're looking back at these albums. It's really in hindsight that we're looking back. I remember going out and I got into bands like Gentle Giant, for instance, and I went back and I bought loads of albums. I got into Emma's Lake and Palmer, and then went back and bought loads of albums. And so a lot of the stuff I sort of came in from, I guess, about 1975 onwards, maybe. I don't know about you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm just a few years younger. So I was 7 in 1971. So nursery crime. I guess we're going to talk about nursery crime at some stage. Now, I really got into Genesis around the time of Seconds Out. Loved it, and it was so. I couldn't listen at the time to nursery crime without knowing Seconds Out. So it's an interesting way of sort of looking back at things. I didn't sort of grow with the band in that respect. I just heard this amazing double live album, and I was hooked. And so I guess I was predisposed to like nursery crime because the band were great by definition. And now I can look at it with some perspective, and there's some bits of it which maybe not so good, but hey, still a great album. And we're going to talk about some others, aren't we?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Well, the radio show that I did, I think the best thing to do is if I go through. I'll just go through the tracks that I actually included in the show. And now I'm going to sort of have a little chat about sort of each one of those and, your perspective on it, my perspective on it. And also, if you're listening to the podcast or watching this on YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, hi, hello, everybody. But, comment, comment on these albums. Tell us about, your experience of them and things like that. It's really, really good to find out people's experience, especially if you were around at the time and you bought them at the time as well. Because, as I say, we're going to be moving into sort of the late 70s when we do these podcasts, and then they are very relevant to us because we was buying them on the day they came out and that sort of stuff. But a lot of these albums, I didn't really know too much about. My introduction to a lot of this stuff was through one of my friend's brothers who was a bit older, and we used to go in and sort of go through his record collection and see what he had, and we'd bring out like Pink Floyd stuff, and we'd never heard any of this stuff before. We put it on, and it was mind blowing. It was absolutely mind blowing, but never really got into it.
Yeah. So likewise, it's a mate's older brother and 2 years older, and he brought out In the Court the Crimson King. Obviously, we've gone back a couple of years for that one. And I mean, that blows your mind when you're 14 years old or something. And
you look at when it came out as well. I mean, 69. I mean, just
amazing. I mean, fully formed. Where did that come from? It wasn't like everyone was expecting it. The world was waiting for Fripp and his mates. And you listen to it, and it's just like, my word. And then my mate said, well, okay, now borrow this one. And he lent me Lizard. And that was just like, hang on a minute. I'm not quite sure where we're going with this. So it took me a while to get back into Crimson. And maybe we'll talk about Islands later on, because
we'll talk about Islands. As you know, it's not one of my all-time favourite albums in the world. It's probably why I didn't make it into the radio show.
Well, for everyone on YouTube, here it is. The Tripid Nebula on the front sleeve.
It's a great album cover. It's a great album cover. Anyway, listen. So the tracks that I played on the album, on the radio show, was Tarkus by Emma's Lake and Palmer, I did Locomotive Breath, Jethro Tull, Echoes, Pink Floyd. Yours Is No Disgrace by Yes. Yeah, I actually got. It's like we've been digging out our albums as well. So I've got a ton of albums in the loft, but yeah, we've been digging out the actual vinyls. I've got a load of stuff on CD as well, which is it's all mad anyway. So yeah, Yours Is No Disgrace by Yes, Genesis, Fountain of Salmalsis, Van Gogh Generator, Man-Erg, which I absolutely love. Focus. Actually, no, I did Egg. Sorry, which is the long piece part 3.
Yeah.
I did Gong, Radio Name Invisible. I got Caravan on there, Winter Wine.
Yeah.
Which do you know what I did on this show? Well, just finish off. I did Roundabout by Yes, and also Rainmaker by Traffic, which I really really love. But there's a few other ones on there as well. But I want to, if we start off with just the very very first one, the album Tarkus. I got into this probably through the Welcome Back, My Friends, The Show Never Ends album. When I actually got that for my birthday when I was, I don't know, 15 or something. I can't remember the actual time. I think it was about sort of I think it was my 15th birthday. I got that. My uncle bought it for me, and it's the Welcome Back, My Friends album is such a great live album, and they play the whole of Tarkus on that. And then when I got the album, it was good. It was great, but there was some things missing which I didn't really understand. Well, if it on the YouTube version of this, we're actually bringing out our albums and we're showing the inner covers and things like that. And the inner cover is really really part of the concept, isn't it? This whole thing of Tarkus, the battles that he had, and all that sort of thing. And it's a really cool little story that when I first heard it, it was just a great piece of music on the live album. When I bought the album, the Tarkus album, went back and bought the Tarkus album and sat there. And this is, I think, the thing that I don't think people really get nowadays with all, the way people download stuff or stream music and things like that. But when we bought albums in the past, we used to sit down with them, put the record on, put the needle on the record. It was almost like I don't know, some sort of spiritual ritual. You put the needle on the record.
It was a ritual. Absolutely, it was a ritual. It was a liturgical experience. It was reverence, and it was immersive. That was our world. It wasn't just the audio; it was the visual as well. And there was only one way to enjoy this stuff, and that was in its completeness. Yeah. Didn't dip into it. So absolutely different experience to current day.
Yeah, and I think the reason why I think it's so special to have these albums is that you could I mean not with this one specifically, but you could sit down and read lyrics, and there's something about listening to music for the first time and reading the lyrics that you absorb everything, but also the inner sleeve of Tarkus has this fantastic artwork which basically tells a story, and it's actually part of the whole of the concept as well.
Yeah, and I think certainly I was sort of into sci-fi at that stage, and I think that's probably relatively, I think, common for people who are into prog discuss. But so no, I was used to sort of other worlds and sort of fantasy type elements of things, and so when you were listening to this, when you were looking at it, it was telling you a story in a way, and you had to kind of work a little bit at it, and that was okay. Because that got the old neurons firing, trying to imagine exactly what they were going on about. And a bit later you learn it's I think supposed to be a bit of an anti-Vietnam War sort of statement by the band.
Yeah,
but it was quite hard going, but that was okay. And but then you had something like Jeremy Bender on it, and you just smiled and went, "That's all right, isn't it?" So
yeah, exactly. I mean, this is the whole thing about these. There's the first side was the concept. It was Tarkus, and when I play it nowadays, because I think over the years as you get older, you get more, I don't know, sophisticated, I guess. But when I play it now, I have two different feelings for it. I think it's a little childish in some ways. You know, it's a especially with the sort of the graphics and the things like that.
Mm.
But I absolutely adore it, and it means so much. You know, the music means so much to me.
Yeah.
Because again, like you, I was always into sci-fi and things like that, and this is science fiction. You know, it's a science fiction story in 20 minutes of music, which you can play along with. You know, you can go along with.
And,
Um,
and ELP, I guess, if we think of now, everyone talks about a lot of people talk about the big six, and I'm less a fan of ELP than some, or still enjoy it very much.
yeah,
I think I probably enjoy Tarkus as a complete sort of album more than I enjoy Brain Salad Surgery, which may be a bit heretical to some people. So the artwork on BSS is fantastic, absolutely, especially if you got the original album, not the one that was airbrushed later on. But I just find some of Brain Salad Surgery just a bit too meandering, a bit too self-indulgent is a word that we sometimes use.
yeah,
I find Tarkus a bit more focused in that regard. I find it a bit more variety. Whereas some of Brain Salad Surgery for me just gets a little bit dense. I feel I've just been hit one too many times.
yeah.
Uh,
I mean, I'm a massive lover of that album, though. I do love that album. It's a big album for me and my psyche. You know, it's again from childhood, listening to Brain Salad Surgery. I mean, I've got it up here somewhere,
yeah,
and it's just absolutely astonishing. But all these albums are really good. I mean, even the B side of this, you know, Tarkus is really quite compelling. But you've also got things like, you know, Bitch's Crystal, which is great.
yeah,
Infinite Space, which is brilliant.
yeah.
Um, and as you say, like, you know, Are You Ready, Eddie, at the end, just to sort of give us a little smile as we go out. And that piano, I just love Keith Emerson's piano in this. It's just so good.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, I don't think it made it on the list, but it was one of two ELP albums that year, wasn't it? Because they also brought out pictures at the end of the year. So for ELP fans, you know, the cup runneth over. They couldn't get enough of it. So yeah. So Tarkus, is it the most important album for me of the year? No, but again, I'm not sure that ELP could really have made Brain Salad Surgery without making Tarkus. I think
Yeah.
Tarkus had to be made to make that next step. So I think very important. And the second album, wasn't it? I mean, quite amazing to think. You know, just to say, I know they're brought together as a super group, and they knew they had their musical chops man. But no, for a second album, for three incredibly talented musicians, that's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, and let's face it, you know, that whole supergroup thing could have fell on its arse. I mean,
Yeah,
really seriously badly.
yeah,
But it didn't, and it was probably one of the sort of the best supergroups of the time. But the thing is, also, you know, because I came in from Welcome Back, My Friends,
mm,
through that route. When I listened to Tarkus on Welcome Back, My Friends, I didn't realise that there was, you know, there's I think it's at the end of, I think it's like the end of Battlefield,
mm,
and they suddenly bring in Epitaph from
yeah,
Crimson.
yeah,
And because I didn't really know King Crimson very well at the time,
yeah,
and I just thought that was part of Tarkus, and
mm,
I really miss it when I listen to the album version. Which is one of the reasons why I probably listen to the live version more than anything else, because
yeah,
I just love that bit where Epitaph comes in at the end of the track. I think it's just so good. You know,
yeah,
before it comes into Aquatarkus, you know, so you got the end of Battlefield, then Epitaph comes in, and it feels
yeah.
so right that it should be there, which is probably why they put it in.
Yeah. Well, my entry point was because again, just being a few years different, was fanfare for the common man. So there
Yeah.
I am, you know, ELP are on maybe top of the pop, certainly Old Grey Whistle Test, something like that. Montreal Stadium, wasn't it, with their furs on, and you know, that's the acceptable pop-tastic face of ELP. And then someone said, you know, Tarkus. I was like, wow, this is a bit different, isn't it? So yeah, a bit like going from Seconds Out with Genesis to Nursery Crime, going, okay, I wonder how they got from point A to point B here,
Yeah.
because this is going to be interesting. I'm up for the ride. You know, how did they get here? This is great.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of a lot of these bands, is that there are these stepping stone albums. You can see the
Yeah,
growth and especially in the bands that you love, that if you've got all the albums and you sort of try to progress through them, even if you did sort of come in at a certain point and go back to the front of the queue, so to speak,
Yeah.
I think that's it's really good to watch that progression, especially with bands like Genesis, because me and you are big Genesis fans.
Oh yeah.
And so I mean, I love every step of Genesis, right up to sort of probably Wind and Wuthering, and maybe a little bit further, but definitely up to sort of the Wind and Wuthering time for me is like absolute 100% awesome Genesis from day one to sort of 78, 80.
Yeah, I can skip past then there were three, but it's past the Duke, which I actually listened to again recently, and I realised I liked it more than I realised I liked it. But certainly all the way up to Wind and Wuthering, fantastic. And we will talk about Nursery Crime at some stage, I guess.
We will do, yeah. But the next track up was Locomotive Breath. Obviously, a fantastic album. This is the one that Ian Anderson said was not a concept album.
Oh, it's not.
And it's not. Absolutely, it's not. But the weird thing is, though, Paul, when I first started listening to this, and I didn't know there was anything about, whether it's a concept album or not a concept album, but it feels like a concept album. If you start taking the first few tracks, you start listening to the album, you take the first few tracks, and there's characters mentioned in, the same characters. Aqualung's mentioned in the second track as well.
I think Cross-Eyed Mary crops up a little bit throughout Tull's
exactly,
doesn't it? Yeah.
But but if you listen to it, and again, when I'm say that when you listen to it in them days, you maybe you sit on a beanbag, put some headphones on, look at the album cover while you're listening to the music. To me, it was like a concept album. It felt like it was all connected. Even though I wasn't really sort of, it was like one of those films that had different stories and different people in the same world. I think that's why people sort of went or thought it was a concept album, when if you actually analyze it, it's not. And then Ian Anderson says it's not, but you've got to take his word for it. He didn't write it as a concept album. You've got to take his word for it. But it just feels like it to me anyway.
Yeah, I think Ian Anderson is a fascinating guy. I'd love to meet him one day. Obviously got strong views on a number of things, and he's done so much good stuff, and hey, he's earned that right. There are a couple of songs, as he admits, it's meant to be a bit of a side swipe at religion. And again, for those people watching in YouTube land, the back of the album cover, it's got the Gothic type font. It's got a bit of a poke at that sort of religious iconography there, etc. So you can understand why people would draw one or two things out of it which aren't there. But to me, so what? So that's part of the I think one of the great and interesting things about prog. There's so much going on. There's a sort of intertextual element going on that you make these connections, and there are so many connections. Hey, if as a listener we make one or two that weren't deliberately there, weren't meant to be there, so what? That's part of our enjoyment. And I don't suppose Anderson would mind too much if we saw stuff that wasn't there, if we kept on buying the albums, and all well and good. We can wait until Thick as a Brick comes along for the mother of all concepts. But so is it a concept album? No. Does it have some thematic unity? Yeah, I guess it does. Yeah, but no, there's stuff on here which is nothing to do with religion per se. But hey, great album, and who as a guitarist, whether a real one or imaginary one, hasn't got their air guitar out of their air guitar case and just done that riff? Martin Barr, thank you for that.
Yeah, exactly. Brilliant stuff. I mean, whether it was meant or not meant, it seems to be like a little slice of a sleazy underworld, with different people's stories all sort of intertwining. That's what it felt like to me.
Yeah, and maybe slightly disingenuous because of Mr. Anderson, because you look at that front cover and everyone goes, "That's Ian Anderson, isn't it?" I mean, it wasn't meant to be. It's like, really?
It's sort of like an organic conceptual work, rather than something that's actually been written. But a bit like I know Lamb Lies Down or 2112 or Small Creeps Day from Mike Rutherford. Those sort of things. They're actually built as stories and written to it. And I don't think he even meant to do it, but I think it sort of comes over as it to me. And I've sort of argued it ever since that it feels like it, whether it was meant or not. So
Yeah.
that's how I feel about it. Listen, so let's go move on to the next one, which is a monster one, and that's Echoes. The track I played was Echoes.
Yeah.
Get the album covers out, you know. We've all got them sitting here, you know. And it is interesting, you know, when you actually, you know, look at these and just look at the way these album covers are all put together and stuff like that. Because this is the album cover for this, you know, Medal is just strange as hell, beautiful, you know, but strange as hell.
It is one of their worst, I would say. You know,
I don't know.
I'm a bit of a Floyd, but you know, I mean, I think there was a story about how the hypnosis guys were a bit embarrassed about it. You know, it was just sort of messing around with some colours, and it looks a bit like a nose and so on like that. But if it works for you, great. It doesn't quite for me. You know, I think it's one of their least good ones. You know, I mean,
this is the strange thing about opinion on stuff in prog, because to me. It's like yes, it probably wasn't meant to be. It might have been even chucked together and things like that. But it's so iconic, you know. It's like band names. You know, you look at different bands. It's like Led Zeppelin. Actually, isn't that great a band name? You know, it's sort of it feels chucked together to me. It just feels a little bit sort of, you know.
Well, wasn't it Keith Moon that apparently gave them that name?
Like a Led Zeppelin or something.
Exactly, yeah.
But it just sort of, I think people fit into things, or bands fit into their names, and you know, albums fit into their covers. You know, they become, because it's not contrived; it's just beautiful. It's just a beautiful album cover, I think. You know, and sort of when you see it straight away, Echoes comes into my mind.
Yeah,
and that's the thing. But I mean, it's hard to think that this was their sixth album as well. You know, there were no. This is 1971. It's their sixth album.
Piper, Saucerful, they've done these soundtracks. Yeah. But they were finding their way, weren't they? I mean, this is why, you know, is this one of their best albums? Not in my opinion. Is it one of their most important albums? Absolutely. Because I think they've been sort of like trying to work out just who they were. You know, they had the Syd Barrett stuff. He obviously moved away. But, you know, they've done their Ummagumma. They've done Atom Heart Mother. And they were, I think, trying to just work out exactly who they were. And I think, you know, they needed Medal to get to Dark Side of the Moon. They needed a track like Echoes so they could piece together the concept of Dark Side of the Moon. So I think really important album. Echoes is a fantastic track. Some of the rest of it I can do without. I don't need barking dogs too much, but that's okay. But I think, you know,
I know what you mean. but one of those days is a brilliant track.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I think sort of Seamus or whatever it's that barking dog one at the end. I can do without. I can also do without the "You Can Never Walk Alone." Yeah, you'll never walk alone's "Fearless." I think it is. I like the beginning of it. I don't like when the crowd comes in, but a Pillar of Winds. Pillar of Winds is brilliant. You know, one of those days, Pillar of Winds, brilliant. I love it.
Did you know apparently why they put "You'll Never Walk Alone" on it? There's a story to this apparently. Because Rog was getting a bit up himself, hard to believe, but he's a big Arsenal fan. So for a bit of fun, that's why they decided to put the Liverpool on there. So just to wind him up. That's what I heard somewhere.
But I mean, I think the Echoes is it really does. I think it's like the very first thing. If you go through the chronology, it's the very first thing that really feels like the way they were going. The sort of
exactly.
It was a stepping stone to becoming the Floyd that we all love. You know.
Yeah, and that's why they needed to do that, because I think they were still a little bit. I mean, Atom Heart Mother's got some interesting bits on it. Ummagumma's got some. But you know, you put all those previous albums together, and you could sort of condense them down into one decent album. You know. And this was the first time they're getting some sort of like real solid artifact out there. I thought so. So yeah, hugely important.
That's what mixtapes are for.
Yeah.
Next one on the list is one of my favourite bands. Yes, I did the track "Yours Is No Disgrace." It was the first of a couple of tracks. Yeah, brilliant album. First of a couple of tracks on the show, because I had like a lot of bands in those. They're really, really prolific. They had a couple of albums out that year. They had Fragile out later in the year, at the end of the year. But this was taken from the Yes album, which was released at the beginning of the year. I think it was like February or something. It was put out. But it's again, the lineup, to me is really important, because it had Tony Kaye, Steve Howe's first album, replacing Peter Banks, and again, sort of shaping that sound. And I think this album, this Yes album is probably one of the most impressive Yes albums that I've got in my collection. I mean, I love a lot of Yes. I mean, I'm a massive, massive Yes fan. But somehow this album it's so good because if you think about it, the tracks on it, things like Starship Trooper and I've Seen All Good People, Perpetual Change, all these tracks are tracks that they're still playing live today.
Exactly, that's the point.
I mean, the songs are that good, they're that iconic, and they're that Yes.
Yeah, this was, I agree. This was their statement album. I mean, for Steve Howe to do what he did on this album, I mean, it's like, where did that come from? And really, I know obviously it's still Tony Kaye rather than some Wakeman bloke who, what did he do? Anyway, but I mean, because Steve Howe had been in a couple of bands, and he'd been Bodast and been Tomorrow with Keith West, and you got glimpses of that. But when you put him in this environment with his other musicians, he really shone, didn't he? I mean, there's so much of Steve Howe on this, and so much of it is so good. I mean, almost 50 years old, songs still being played, still get a thrill every time you hear them. And musicianship, fantastic, absolutely great choice.
Yeah, and if you get a chance to dig the album out, then put it on and listen to it again, because sonically, it is really, really dynamic sonically as well. I mean, it's like a really well recorded album.
Yeah, and of course, there's a link there, obviously, with VLP, with Eddie Offord, isn't it? Because he was engineer for both of them. But yeah, absolutely, it sounds. And of course, one of the things about Prague is, of course, well, you got some sort of interesting photos but on the back, what sort of instruments do they play? And Steve Howe is playing electric and acoustic guitars and Vaccalia. Well, I mean, I'm in my mid-teens, and asking all my mates what a Vaccalia. I've got no idea, and it's just like, what are you on about? It's like, well, it's this world that I inhabit every now and again, and it just intrigues you, doesn't it? Absolutely intrigues you. I mean, Anderson's lyrics have had a bit of a kicking over the years, but they fit the music. Absolutely fit the music. So yeah, I've got no problem with that. And again, the back cover, I mean, that's kind of like interesting. Disembodied sort of a head floating above a chair. Anyway.
But there's some great keyboard on this from Tony Kaye, and some really lovely guitar from Steve Howe.
Yeah. And Rick Wakeman to this day still gets pissed off with people asking him to sign this album, because everyone assumes all that good keyboard work was his. And he's like, no.
And not to forget Chris Squire's bass on this. Some of the stuff on here, and Yours Is No Disgrace. If you listen to the bass on Yours Is No Disgrace, it's just absolutely astonishing. Yeah, it's astonishing. And it's almost like a masterclass in bass.
Yeah, and it influenced so many people. I mean, you briefly mentioned 2112. Geddy Lee, I know, is clearly influenced by Chris Squire. Well, who wouldn't be if you're a bassist? He was.
To me, in prog, I mean, you've got where bass is concerned, you've got to think, people like Geddy Lee. Again, astonishing stuff. If you listen to stuff right from the beginning of Rush, right the way through, some of the bass stuff that Geddy Lee plays is just absolutely incredible. Chris Squire as well, and John Camp from Renaissance. To me, they're the three pinnacle bass players. I mean, there's loads of other great bass players.
The other one I'd throw in the mix, and it's sort of borderline prog, but I think it's progressive music, is Jaco Pastorius and some of the stuff that he was doing. Some of that fretless octave running type stuff.
Yeah.
Fantastic. One of the other things about these groups we're talking about, which sometimes gets lost in today's age, I think, is that these groups were determined that what they put on the record they could then play live. Now they didn't need, I mean, did it even exist? But you were going to hear live something really close to that which you heard off a studio album. And that was really important to them. Rush, we just mentioned, Rush have been always very keen on that. So I think that's another important thing. So when you went to see these bands, it kind of sounded very much like what you're expecting as well, with some interesting improvisations as well.
Yeah, no backing tapes.
No, exactly. And it's just like, wow, they really are this good,
And of course, it's the year of the Mellotron. It's Moogs are coming in a lot more, which we'll sort of go into a little bit, I guess, because we're going to be talking about a bit more about Yes when Rick Wakeman come in, and that sort of thing. But again, another bass player that I absolutely love was Mike Rutherford from Genesis. He's got again, I think people sort of underrate him a little bit, but if you listen to some of the bass lines in some of that older Genesis music, they're really, 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 really good. They're really good.
Andy, I'm going to have to go back and re-listen to them because I'm in that really camp. So I will go back. I'll turn up the bass on my NAD amplifier and see if I can spot it, because I'm yet to be convinced. But hey, I'll go listen.
Yeah, I love him. I love some of the stuff he was doing, and especially if you look at the old some of the videos of the old stuff that they did. Playing double necks, he's playing a lot of 12-string. A lot of the 12-string guitar is Mike Rutherford and Tony Banks playing. Especially on the beginning of Supper's Ready and all those sort of things. So I just got a big soft spot for Mike Rutherford. I think he's a great bass player and a great sort of 12-string guitarist in the band. But the album, or rather the track that we put on the show, was Fountain of Salmacis, and this is off the Nursery Crime album. Again, this one has got a brilliant album cover.
Absolutely fantastic album cover. I mean, you look at it, it's Paul Whitehead's obviously done a great job of trying to recreate that sense of Victoriana. It fits with music, the musical box, but inside, you've got those sort of insets for the lyrics for each of the songs, which is always fantastic. And the point of detail, which I love about this album cover, so anyone who's got it, on the back, on the top left, you've got what looks like a squashed fly that's caught under the lacquer, the varnish of this picture that was hanging somewhere. So the first went to that point of detail. What do I love about this album cover? Everything, including the squash fly under the varnish. I mean,
it's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And this is the beauty of having these album covers. And I don't think people sort of realise, if you came into music when everything was CD, I really, and I don't want to sound patronising, but I feel sorry for people who've come in just on CDs, because the having an album cover, having something, this big to the artwork and everything else that is on these album covers, they're just astonishing, especially with the Yes stuff. I mean, I pulled this out as well.
Oh yeah.
And to have
the worlds that Roger Dean created through his visual representations.
It sort of goes on
and
on and sort of goes on and on. The album covers on this is Yes songs I'm showing to people at the moment, and if it just the Roger Dean stuff that comes off this is just absolutely amazing. But to be a kid and have this in your hand and just open these albums up and see all the album artworks in it, and again with Nursery Crime, it's exactly the same. You've got all the lyrics in the inside cover, so you've got gatefold sleeve, you've got all the lyrics on the inside. And with, I'd suggest that with bands like Genesis, the lyrics are actually probably more important because they're genuine stories. I mean, if you look at the sort of the tracks that are on the album, you got Musical Box, which is again still one of those tracks that they play today. Return of the Giant Hogweed. Which, when I was a kid, with headphones on, sitting on my beanbag with headphones on, blasting this into my brain. Return of the Giant Hogweed was an incredible story. So was Harold the Barrel.
Oh yeah.
all of them, even for Absent Friends, I loved, but just
No,
everything about this. Seven Stones,
it showed
uh,
they had a drummer who could sing. It was good, wasn't it? So
and then ending up with Fountain of Salmosis, where you've got this incredible intro, this keyboard intro
mm.
that just blows you away.
so
And Mellotron,
I'm going to put it out there. I reckon this Nursery Crime was the most important album of the year. So there we go. Because I mean, I love Genesis. Let's just say that. But they've done their Jonathan King, BG Light album. They've done Trespass, which was such a big step forward. But then Nance Phillips had to go for well-publicised reasons. And a bunch of charterists, public school boys, wondering whether they were going to stick with this music lark or go on to university or whatever else. And they've just lost founder member Guiding Light. And they bring out Nursery Crime with a new drummer and a new guitarist. And they couldn't have got to Foxtrot. They couldn't have got to all the great things they did, I don't think, without doing this album. Because it showed they could move on from Trespass, from the long form stuff. They could also do shorter form stuff. But also importantly, they'd more, I think, dynamic. Because this album has got dynamics all over the place. Within songs, within the album. They had the knife because they needed something at the end of their show to bring people to their feet, because people having to sit down while they're doing tuning of their 12 strings. This album has got much more grit to it. 10 years ago, I was lucky to see Transatlantic, and Hackett got on stage for the encore, and they did Return of the Giant Hogweed, and it was just a shred fest between him and Roy Stoltz. This album, they rock out as well. So, they weren't just about pastoral, idyllic, stagnation stuff. This was an album that had, I think, so much on it. It's not their best album. You couldn't get to get them out by Friday. You couldn't get to Supper's Ready without having Nursery Crime, I think. Most important album.
yeah, absolutely. And again, another one for sticking back on the turntable and just going through and listening to it. It's absolutely wonderful. Next one on the list, another favourite band of mine. And I played Man-Erg from the Van de Graaff Generators. This is off Prawn Hearts. A great album for me. There's something about Pete Hamill's vocal.
Yeah.
And the thing that I never realised until I actually started, sort of looking back on it and looking at this in a sort of more constructive way of doing shows and things like that, because I hadn't really listened to a lot of Van de Graaff in recent years. It's one of those bands that I absolutely loved at the time. It spent a ton of time on my turntables, Van de Graaff Generator tracks, albums. But for some reason, it was one of those bands that sort of I stopped playing. It wasn't until I started doing the show again and going back and thinking, okay, what tracks do I want to play? What were tracks for me? What were big tracks for me? What changed my mindset? What changed the way I thought about stuff, about the world, and all that sort of thing? And Van de Graaff was one of those bands. I remember listening to Refugees was probably the first track, even on this album. But I listened to Refugees, and this is before I actually liked Van de Graaff, and it takes a little time to get into them. But I listened to Refugees, and even though when I read the lyrics, it doesn't really sort of tell me the story, but it feels so weighty, that track. It feels so good, and Pete Hamill's vocals in it are just bleed into your brain somehow. I don't know what it is about his vocals. I don't know. It's just I can't even explain it. It's really annoying because I can't explain concisely in a sentence why this is so good. But this album, Pawn Hearts, was absolutely brilliant. I love Man-Erg. It's one of my favorite tracks. And I love the rest of the album. I mean, obviously the one that people would be talking about maybe is the better track is The Plague of Lighthouse Keepers.
Yeah.
But it's long, and you've got a radio show, and you can only play so many 25-minute songs or 22-minute pieces. So
I mean, Van de Graaff Generator did disband for a few years after this, didn't they?
Yeah.
So and Godbluff, I think, was their comeback album a few years later. But I mean, I agree. There's something about Hamill's voice and lyrics, and that you do get that sense of density of heft to what they do. It's not an easy listen, but it's one of those that, it pays off, it rewards if you put the time in. Because it wasn't a guitar-led band, it was Hugh Banton, it was Dave Jackson going off on, I mean, incredible sort of musicianship, and it somehow fitted together. And like a lot of the good prog stuff, you're never quite sure where it was going to go next, but it was going to be interesting. And and it probably did fit together. And I mean, that year as well, and Fool's Mate, Pete Hamill put out Fool's Mate as well, didn't he? Which is another great album. So, the prolific, the fecundity of Hamill to be churning out this stuff, and his solo work, as well as the Van der Graaf Generator and Van der Graaf stuff, is amazing as well. So, and I think it's surprising and a shame that they don't get, I think, enough attention. They're not mentioned in the same sort of hallowed, revered terms as Tal and Genesis and Yes and ELP. And I think they're definitely up there. And Paul Hart, do you know where allegedly they got the title Paul Hart from? Apparently, the engineer or whoever it was, or producer, was saying, Jackson, you've got to get your bits done. And a bit of spoonerism. Instead of calling them horn parts, he called them porn hearts. And that's apparently where they got the name of the album from. It's horn parts, slightly misspoken. So, which is brilliant. I mean, it has to be true. That's so good. It has to be true.
True. But David Jackson, the twin sax. When you see them, you go back and have a look on YouTube and see some live stuff. It is really incredible that you've got Hugh Banton on
organ
stuff, and you got just so an organ, drummer, sax player, and Peter Hamill playing piano a lot of the time and messing around with those sort of things. No real guitar player, and I don't miss the guitar at all. I don't really miss it at all. It's got I think that's what gave the band such a unique sound. And if you put that in with Peter Hamill's vocal, the way he sings. Because I know a load of prog fans, a lot of friends of mine who are prog fans, just don't like the band, don't like Van der Graaf Generator, just because they don't like the sound. But I have to say that I have converted quite a few. I've been very, very persistent, and I've converted quite a few. I said, look, just listen to this again, because they didn't like it at the time. They all went off and they'd go and watch their Genesis and their Yes and all that sort of thing, and their Zeppelins and all those sort of things. And Van der Graaf got sort of put to the back. But recently, I've been pushing this in front of people, and
Refugees would be a good sort of entry point. And here's the thing that's going to upset some people, but I think when they talk about the first song ever played on Radio 1, people always go, "Yeah, it's Flowers in the Rain" or "I Can Hear the Grass Grow," wasn't it, by The Moo? Sorry, and Tony Blackburn, I think. But strictly speaking, I think they were wrong, because they used theme 1 from Van der Graaf Generator to open up the show, just like Tommy Vance. Friday Rock Show always used it. And I think, strictly speaking, the first bit of music ever heard on Radio 1 was Van der Graaf Generator. Happy to be corrected on that by anyone, but I'm holding on to that for my prog life.
No, that's right. I mean, theme 1 is a really, really good track. I mean, it wasn't on the original album, the original UK album. I think it was on the US album. It's like sort of between Lemmings and Man-Erg.
Yeah.
Because I've got a copy of both of them.
Kudos.
And that was weird, because I remember sort of getting cause I had a scratch on my UK one, and I sort of bought a second-hand copy from a shop. And when Lemmings finished, theme 1 came on. I went, what?
Yeah.
What's going on? And I didn't realize it was a US copy, but very, very strange. Great track though. And every time I hear that, it's Tommy Vance, wasn't it? It was Tommy Vance. Friday
Tommy
Rock
Vance. Yeah. And he had the voice for the rock show, didn't he? Fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, at 10 o'clock on Friday night, a bunch of teenage boys, playing it as loud as they could without their parents hearing it. Fantastic.
Yeah, I've got great affection for Friday Rock Show. It's where I first heard Marillion as well. They did a session for BBC.
Yeah.
So that was first time I heard that. Anyway, back to the tracks. Egg. Now, how can I put this nicely? I'm not the biggest fan of Egg. You know,
Mm,
they do sort of pass me by, but there's this on this album. Um, I really liked this part 4, this long piece number 3.
mm,
I just really liked it. I've always liked it. It's one of those tracks that I put onto compilation tapes. You know, when I
yeah,
was a kid, I used to put this on there. Um, but fantastic. I mean, again, it's the Canterbury scene. It's
yeah.
you know, Dave Stewart. You know, went on to play loads of other stuff. I mean,
Oh, yes.
lots of things. You know, Hatfield and the North, and you know,
Yeah, yeah,
National Health, and you know,
yeah,
all the other great stuff. All that, you know, and Bruford, of course. He played with Bruford as well.
yeah.
Um, yeah, great keyboard player. So that's why I included it on this, because it was one of those tracks that, from my childhood, I had the Egg album, and I just sort of put it onto. Always put that track onto on the different tapes. So it was like just part of my childhood. That's why I put it on there. So forgive me. Are you
No,
an Egg fan?
yeah, yes, absolutely. And again, I think it's a band that have been cruelly underrated, underappreciated. And after the fact, everyone refers to the Canterbury sound. And they weren't the most accessible of the Canterbury bands, were they? And I think that's
No.
partly why they suffered. So I think we're going to talk about Caravan later with their great album of the year. So if you listen to Canterbury Sound Music Man, then you're probably going to be listening to a bit of Caravan and stuff like that. And maybe if you're really out there, then maybe a bit of the Soft Machine stuff that was going on at the time. So I think sort of Egg sort of like got passed by. And again, slightly hard, but they're obviously very clever and very talented. And I think just sometimes you felt like this is just kind of hard work, and I'm not quite sure I'm ready for it just now.
Mm.
But as you said, I mean, Dave Stewart's gone on to do so many great things, and I would, I'd put this on the mixtape, absolutely. And I think it's one of those that, once you sort of dip your toes into the prog waters, and you're happy with your Van de Graaff generator and your ELP, then why wouldn't you like this? Because that was great. Yeah. Anyone out there who hasn't heard it, play it. Listen.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, this is the whole point of doing the radio show. To be honest, is to keep prog alive. So if you're a prog fan, then go on to Mixcloud. That's where I put all my shows. Yeah, and just search for Rockin' Rebel Radio. That's rocking without the G, ROCKIN Rebel Radio. Look out for that, and subscribe to it. Enjoy it. Listen to the shows, because I'm going to be releasing my last year's Christmas show again. Because he's got loads of great prog tracks in my Christmas show. Anyway,
prog isn't just for Christmas; it's a gift that keeps
it's
on
not.
giving.
It's for life. Next up is Gentle Giant.
Yeah.
Well, you basically just said it all. Gentle Giant. Again, one of those bands that, like a lot of prog music, takes a little bit of time to get into.
Yeah.
I remember, getting this, or getting out. I think I had Freehand was my first
Okay.
taste. I think it was, I don't know what year that was, 76 or I can't remember when that was out. But I got Freehand. I think no, probably 75. Anyway, I got Freehand and I started listening to that. That was my first exposure to Gentle Giant, and I bought it through recommendation. Someone said, it's a great album, go and buy it. And I put it on and I hated it. And it's one of those albums that every so often, you dip into the albums and you put it on. So I'll give this one a go again. And I tried it again, and I probably did that for about a year. I pulled it out once a month just to give it a pop, and didn't like it. And then one day I was walking down the street and I was whistling a tune, and I didn't know where the tune came from.
Right.
And it's the most bizarre thing that's ever happened to me, because these things don't happen to me.
Yeah.
I tend to know where things are, and all that sort of stuff. But
Yeah.
I started whistling this tune, and it was off that Freehand album.
Yeah.
And I was just sort of walking down the street going, and I was whistling on Reflection from the Freehand album, and I didn't like Gentle Giant. So
Yeah.
I was racking my brain. I was thinking, I wonder what that is, and then I started filling the lyrics, and then I thought, oh, I remember what that is. Pulled Gentle Giant album out. It's the Freehand album. Put it on, fell in love with it, and then bought everything from Gentle Giant. And that's where I got to.
I mean, that is fascinating because I think if someone was going to say, the most whistleable, is that a word, of prog tracks or prog bands, Gentle Giant don't immediately jump to mind.
So that I know.
Exactly, that's fascinating, isn't it? And I think one of the things that makes Gentle Giant so interesting, I mean, one where they started from, because it was Simon Dupree, wasn't it? The Big Sound with Kites, and you listen to that and you listen to this album and go, really? But no, the Shulman brothers, obviously very talented. And it was, I guess, part of what I struggled with initially was they were clearly, they seemed to be very intellectual, and I certainly wasn't. And the song titles, they weren't Harold the Barrel, it was about Pantagruel and stuff like that. And their album covers quite famously, talked about, this is for people who like intellectual music. And I was kind of like, and the style was very different. So whereas a lot of prog music, you could say, has got a romantic era type influences, with Gentle Giant, it seems to be much more sort of Baroque style.
Yeah.
Which I'm just thinking about when you're talking about whistling, because that Baroque style, perhaps more of a, I don't know if you're a churchgoer, Andy, but maybe they've got more of a, it's more association with sort of church type music, and we talked about ritual earlier. And maybe that's how that sort of came. But they were very, very intelligent. The counterpoint stuff going on, the way stuff fitted together. This is way before math rock and making stuff fit together. But they made it fit together for their own technical ability. So once I started getting into it, then I was like, yeah, I'm there now. You don't need to explain it anymore. You don't need to convince me. I've got it. It took me a while, but again, this is just another band for me that don't get the recognition they deserve, and humour as well. I mean, that album cover, Acquiring the Taste. Anyone out there in YouTube there? But yes, it is somebody licking somebody's posterior. This is.
Well, it looks like that, but it's
It was meant to be. It was meant to be a dig at the record company about how to get on. So there we go. That's.
And the track I played was Pentagon's Nativity.
Yeah.
Again, fantastic track. I mean, everything on that album is really, really good. Definitely well worth having a listen to. And again, have a listen to the show, and you'll listen to that. And then, if you're new to prog and you want to sort of get into it a little bit and find out a bit more, then the shows are just full of prog of the highest quality. I mean, it really, there's some fantastic albums out there that we played over the years. And also, we're not just doing stuff from the 70s. We're actually putting stuff out, which is, I mean, I do a 2019 retrospective. I've got, as I say, I've got my Christmas show coming up and things like that. So there's loads of different shows you can have a listen to. Next track was, I put a couple of tracks on for a band again that really sort of blew me away. And I don't know whether you call them prog. I mean, I call them prog. I call lots of things prog, because prog can wander across a lot of stuff, Camembert Electric by Gong is the album, and I played Radio Gnome. Brilliant, isn't it? Radio Gnome, which is only like a little short track, so it's like just a minute and a half long or something. So I played Radio Gnome, and then You Can't Kill Me. But it's so good. I got into this mainly because a mate of mine, Brian, who's a little bit of a hippie, introduced me to him. So I grew up with things like, Angel's Egg and, this album, Camembert Electric, Flying Teapot and all that sort of stuff. But it is really, David Allen's brain, poured out on vinyl. And it is probably one of the again, it's just so good to listen to something which is so different. It's very, very much hippie head music though, isn't it?
It is. And I guess we're just showing up the gatefold for people here. And for a lot of prog for me was kind of like, I'm a frustrated piano player. I can't achieve this level. I'm not going to be Rick Wakeman. I'm not going to be Tony Banks. And I heard this type of music and thought, maybe I could do this sort of stuff though. And you could tell there's a sense of fun. And sometimes some of the prog stuff did come across as a bit po-faced, despite the How with the Barrel and the Are You Ready, Eddie, and all that sort of stuff. And this was a bit of fun. You got people living on some farm somewhere, and Blundido Badegras, submarine captain Christian Trich, Bert Camembert. I mean, just like this is fun, isn't it? And it came across as fun, and of course, the artwork with the cartoon stuff, which we saw in later albums, the Flying Teapot trilogy you just mentioned, etc. I mean, it's just like it was. You can't listen to this without having a smile on your face. And the fact that Covers Traby is a member of Gong at the moment and bringing the music, keeping the music alive with the rest of the band members is fantastic. They're still out there, they're still playing, they're still great fun. The gigs they did with Steve Hillage last year or year before, absolutely brilliant. So if you have a smile on your face, put on some Gong. This is great. And of course, it was one of those very cheap albums, wasn't it? The newly launched Virgin label, and it was only 49p or something, wasn't it? Brilliant, because Virgin had just been launched. The Virgin Group had just been launched the year before. So anyway, put a smile on your face, play some Gong, and say a little prayer for David Allen, who passed away a little while ago. Brilliant guy.
Like a lot, they're really sort of getting on a bit now in these bands. There's this is one of the reasons why I want to sort of bring it back and bring this genre to the fore again. Because I don't want to lose it. I don't want to lose this. This is we've got Radio 6 that plays fantastic music from the past. We've got stuff on the radio like classical music and jazz and hip hop and everything else, which is all great. Every piece of music has, or every genre of music has its place. But I think progressive rock has been sort of sidelined, and there's some incredible music in this. And this is why I want people to support us. Support the YouTube channel, ProgAxia YouTube channel. Support the podcast. We're out on all the podcasting platforms. Just come and support us as much as you possibly can.
So Andy, can I just give a shout out to myself? I'm not sure if that's appropriate, but I'm going to give a shout out to me.
Is this the Dr. Prog bit?
Yes, it is. So to Andy's point, this hasn't been rehearsed. I mean, we're both quite enthusiastic about prog for anyone who hasn't worked that out, and so many people are, and it's under researched, it's underappreciated, and so I'm actually doing some research. I'm just basically want to talk to people, listen to people who love this stuff. So if you love prog and you'd like to talk to somebody about it to help me with my research project, because I want to bring this stuff to life and to prominence, please get in touch. At your convenience, we'll get together and you can tell me why you love this stuff. And I really want to hear that. So, so there you go. End of the promo, end of the ad. We can move on.
But this is because you're doing what exactly? And why I'm calling it Dr. Prog?
Yeah, I've just started a year or so. I'm into a PhD, a doctorate in why people enjoy, value progressive rock. Amazing what you can do doctorate in, isn't it? Dr. Prog, yes, I've trademarked Dr. Prog. So and we don't really understand it, and it's been derided by critics and journos. It doesn't get much airtime, and I just think so unfair, frankly. And there's so much in it, and so it's just so rich and it's so right for exploring why we enjoy it so much. So please get in touch. I'd really love to hear from you.
Yeah, we'll put links in, get in touch with us, and this is all about sharing as well. I mean, if you've got something to say about this, then you can come on the show. We can come on the podcast and talk to us about things and stuff like that. So we're going to really start sort of digging into this. So next track up is Focus. I love Focus, and there it is, Moving Waves. Otherwise known as Focus 2. Track I took off of this was Janice. Again, one of my favourite tracks on this is Eruption. It's again another 23-minute track. Another track that you put your headphones on and then drift off into another world. Absolutely fantastic. But I do love Janice. I think it's a great track. This is also where the album that Hocus Pocus came on.
Yep.
And so I think most people who know Focus know Hocus Pocus because of the yodeling and all that sort of thing. It's not typical of Focus, but what it is typical of is how mental they were.
Those crazy Dutch guys.
Yeah.
They've been in the coffee shop, haven't they?
Yeah. But it's fair to say, I mean, a lot of Focus stuff is a little bit mental sometimes, you know. But it brought out on guitar Jan Ackerman, you know, who's
Hugely
still,
underrated.
you know,
Underrated. Great guitarist.
I think one of the best guitarists in the world, Jan Ackerman, you know, and I just think it's just incredible that people aren't singing his name from the rooftops, because incredible guitarist. And if you listen to some of the stuff if you listen to Eruption, that 23-minute track, there is so much great guitar, there's some great keyboard in there, you know, mellotrons and, you know, sax and flutes and you name it. It's just so much great music in there. And as you say, this depth of music, musicianship and all the rest of it. It's just an incredibly good album overall. But the song I put on there, Janice, I just think is just a beautiful, great track. You know.
Yeah, it is. It is, and it is a better choice than Hocus Pocus. I mean, I love Hocus Pocus. We all love Hocus Pocus. Anyone who's seen Focus has heard it, because it's still in the set list and it gets played every time. Because how can you not? And hey, Trace Van Leer, he still carries it off. You know, he can still do it. So. Yeah, and Jan Ackerman's done a bunch of solo albums, if anyone's interested, and he plays a variety of styles. You know, he's got a lot of strings in his guitar strings to his bow. Well worth listening.
Yeah, definitely. And Hocus Pocus is a great track to play at parties. You know, if you want to go a bit mental, that's the track to play at parties.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Janice is a great track. Sylvia's another great track, of course, from a different album. So anyway, moving on.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to go on to a track that we mentioned, or a band that we mentioned earlier in the podcast, which is Caravan. Again, this is brilliant album. And again, the one who will know most of for this is going to be Underground. It's like, you know, again, another 22-minute track. There's a lot of long pieces in progressive rock, as most people know, and I think that's one of the detractors a lot of people sort of talk about is, they're just like long rambling pieces. Nothing could be further from the truth. You know, there's the songs are long, but it's a bit like, you know, I often see it in the same sort of way as classical music. You know, there's long pieces with, you know, different movements and stories that run through them and stuff like that. And I think that's really the thing of things like 9 Feet Underground by Caravan. It's a sort of like a lot of this stuff is like a fairy ground ride. You know, it's just you put your headphones on and you go somewhere else. This isn't about listening to music to dance to. It's not about listening to music to, you know, sort of tap your feet and whistle along the road with. Well, yeah, I say that even though I was whistling earlier. But it's music that to get submerged in, and I think this album is one of those albums that is just incredibly good for getting submerged in.
I agree. I still love 9 Feet Underground. Caravan are still touring. Still great fun to watch. You know, Golf Girl, they're still playing. And Underground Pink, they put in their set list recently as well. And Love to Love You. So, you know, this is, you know, again, one of those albums that, you know, like you're saying with the Yes album, the music is still up there, still worth listening to. 9 Feet Underground is a masterclass. And unlike some bands, and I was saying, you know, kind of like stepping stones, Andy, to the next great work, you know, this to me was their peak. I know there are people out there that like For Girls to Go Plump in the Night, which came a couple of years later. But, you know, this for me, if there's one Caravan album to get, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, this is the one. It is absolutely
I think you're right. This is definitely the, for me, the sort of pinnacle of it, of Caravan. But In the Land of Grey and Pink is a great track as well. The reason why I put Winter Wine on there is because it's just one of my all-time favorite tracks. I really like it. And of course, again, because it's a radio show, I can play some long pieces. You know, in some of the shows, I played things like, you know, Supper's Ready, and I played, you know, one side of Tales from Topographic Oceans and stuff
All
like
right.
that on my radio, which you know, I'm in charge. I can play what the bloody hell I want. You know, and I have played 9 Feet Underground on another show, so you know, I have played it before. But I just wanted because it's, you know, putting everything in a year, and it's a 2-hour show. You can only have so many 22-minute tracks, so you know.
And I think one of the reasons why Winter Wine is a great choice, it's very evocative, and I think that's one of the great things about Caravan. You know, you can close your eyes and it just evokes so many pictures in your head. You know, pastoral, bit of whimsy, and the artwork again. You know, the artwork on this is superb. You know, it seems to fit with the music, and I don't think I'm just sort of trying to imagine that. It just does, and although there's some schoolboy humour behind where the title comes from. If you can't work it out, we can reply privately to you on that. But it's fantastic. I love it. And they have some fun, don't they? I mean, Golf Girl is a bit of fun. Yeah, it's great. And the thing about song titles with Caravan, look through all their albums. They have some fun with some of the titles. So,
yeah, a lot of tongue in cheek, isn't it? Like, you know, it is almost you know, schoolboy.
It is.
Stuff, really, you know, which again is, I think, one of the reasons why a lot of people sort of dismiss prog is because there is sort of little bits of schoolboy humor, but everybody was so young when they were doing this, you know.
Good point. Really good point. Yeah. What were you doing when you were 21 or whatever? You know, I mean, I was not producing albums as brilliant as this, and if I could have done, I would have done. You know, I was still making fart jokes. So, you know, fair play to them that they can make this incredible. 49 years later, we're still talking about this stuff and, you know, raving about it. So
it's amazing. So next track, we're coming into the last couple of tracks now. This is off the Fragile album.
Yeah.
Another great piece of artwork. So again, if you're listening to us on the podcast, then go over to the ProgAxia YouTube channel, because we're showing sort of, you know, album graphics and stuff.
Another gatefold. I mean, some of these albums, and you've been gatefolds. Yeah, isn't that great?
But it's just what it's all about. You know, the artwork is as much part of the whole overall concept of all of these sort of things as anything else. You know, again, fantastic Roger Dean cover, just a beautiful album. In fact, I don't know if you've ever seen this. This is well, what I'm got in my hand at the moment is a book by Roger Dean, and it's a book called Views, and I've had this for years. It cost me at the time, I got a price on the back of it of £3.95.
The best £3.95 you probably spent ever. I mean,
it is, and it's
absolutely. If someone offered you £100 for that now, would you take it?
No.
No. No,
absolutely not. But it is literally full of amazing Roger Dean.
Ah, Gentle Giant. There you go.
Giant one and all this sort of thing. It's just so much good stuff. There's, you know, all the Yes stuff, all Relayer, Close to the Edge, Green Slade stuff, the Virgin logos. You know, it's just Uriah Heep stuff. It obviously be so that, you know, the list goes on and on and on. And at the time, I was working in a photographer's up in London, and I didn't realise this, but inside of my my book Views, I've actually got some negatives, or what they call copy negs.
Oh yeah,
the graphics.
That's cool.
You know, because I loved it so much, so I started doing sort of copy negs or negatives of these things, so I could print them up again. So all line stuff as well. So I found that in there, and that sort of blew my mind because it took me back to one of my first jobs. You know.
Yeah. And if anyone's not aware, Roger Dean still does sort of online sort of videos and stuff via himself, via Trading Boundaries, which is a great venue. Shout out to those guys. So if you want to tune in to one of Roger's regular, where he's just daubing away, chatting, he's got a lovely style about him, and you think he's not doing much, and then half an hour later, it's suddenly like that. Oh my God, that's amazing!
Oh, no, he is an incredible artist and
architect.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but he builds worlds in pictures, and that whole the fragile cover is again is so evocative. It's it's a world, but it's got mountains and trees which are a little bit sort of exaggerated. But
Yeah.
it just put this beautiful thing, this fragile world, on the front cover of the Fragile album by Yes. So, and the song I put in the show was, of course, Roundabout. It kicks off the album. Just another fantastic track. And this is really the first album with Rick Wakeman.
It is. It is.
Replaced Tony Kaye, and even though I love Tony Kaye, again, there is this progression of things going on, and we wouldn't have had Close to the Edge, which I think is just an incredible album, without going through this fragile process and bringing in Rick Wakeman. And I guess they the story behind it is that they wanted to expand the keyboard sound or expand the textures behind everything.
And Tony Kaye wasn't up for that.
Sort of musical pictures to paint, and I guess it was probably John Anderson that was and Chris Squire probably the catalyst behind that, because they're the sort of drivers. And so they sort of got rid of Tony Kaye, which I think is in some ways a real shame, because I love Tony Kaye's keyboards. I love his organ playing. I think it was astonishing. But we wouldn't have had things like Close to the Edge and Fragile in the way it is. So.
And it was obviously it didn't have lasting damage, because Tony Kaye did come back for some of the later incarnations of Yes in the 80s, when you had the opportunity to roll up your sleeves and have those slightly cringy photo shots. But Wakeman did obviously take them to a different. And it's amazing, isn't it, Rick Wakeman, because the impact he had on Yes and on the prog scene. And when you distill it down to how many albums he actually played on. He obviously played on this and Close to the Edge and Tales, and then, well documented, went off and then was brought back. But then after Tomato, went off again. But the impact, I mean, people think about, Yes, you're going to think about Rick Wakeman, aren't you?
I mean, for me, because I'm such a massive Yes fan, when you get to something like Relayer and Patrick Moraz, and the sound that he brought, I just thought was astonishing, And you don't need Rick Wakeman for Yes. And if there's any Yes fans out there that are sort of falling off their chairs or spitting their tea at this moment, I don't care. I love Tony. I love Tony Kaye. I love Rick Wakeman, and I love Patrick Moraz. And I think that all of those brought something to the table.
Yeah, I think Relayer is unfairly criticised. I think, listen to it. It's got some great stuff on it. 3 tracks, but fantastic, well worth it. Yeah, Moraz brought something different, slightly jazzier feel to it. Moraz incredibly talented. I mean, the solo albums he's done, The Story of I, was fantastic. If you haven't heard that, then get that one out. So yeah, but this album, it's curious though, because this album, in my memory, Andy, I think it's better than it actually is, because there's a lot of, I think, a bit of padding on this. We're going to do each of the solo tracks, and we need some
Hands and Drums I can leave behind.
Yeah, I mean, of the solo ones, The Fish is the standout one, definitely.
Astonishing.
But, We Have Heaven, the Cans and Brahms, 5% for Nothing.
Paul, if you think about this, right, Roundabout. Just the track that I actually put onto the show, right from Steve Howe's guitar, right from the beginning, it just screams Yes. I mean, it's just absolutely fantastic from that first little bit of Steve Howe guitar, and then when Chris Squire comes in with the bass, I mean, it's like, again, masterclass on bass.
Yeah, I agree. You get the album just for that, just for Roundabout. I agree. And
it was to me, it was a toss up when I was putting the show together, either to put Roundabout or Heart of the Sunrise on, because I love Heart of the Sunrise as well. But you've got Long Distance Runaround, South Side of the Sky on that album. These are great tracks, and even We Are Heaven, Eliza Sanhillo, I love, because again, it's one of those things, you put the headphones on and you go somewhere else, and I love John Anderson's voice and everything else. But We Are Heaven is like a precursor. I mean, it's like 5 or 6 years earlier. but that's what We Are Heaven is a bit like Eliza Sanhillo came out, because it was his track. So there's lots of good parts on that album, incredible parts on this album. It just, again, blows you away. Now, on the next one, the next track and the last track on this, this is going to be probably the most controversial track, I guess.
Whoa.
This was Traffic. Now, people don't think Traffic is a prog band, and I'll put my hands up. They're probably not the most prog band in the world. The reason why I put it on there again is because at the time when I was thinking back on the albums that I love at the time, I really do love this album. The album was called The Low Spark of High Heel Boys. It was the 5th album they ever did, and I think one of their best. Just the track Hidden Treasure, I think, is worth the money. The very first track on the album is worth the money. But I just really love this because the whole album's got these like touches of sort of Crosby, Stills and Nash. It's like sort of this mix between this West Coast early 70s stuff, but it's also got this crossover with a bit of, I don't know, David Bowie or something. It's just like something very, very strange going on. But it's got jazz and blues and funk and rock, and everything's there. Everything is there. There's some Hidden Treasure is a beautiful track off this album. Some great piano off here as well, and it's really a Steve Winwood album, I guess. However, I decided to put it on there purely because it just needs to be listened to. Again, it's one of those albums I think it needs to be listened to. It sort of falls into the same sort of genre as Progressive. It was more sort of, I don't know, West Coast vibe Progressive, but I think I'm trying to justify it desperately into the show, but I just love that track. I just love Rainmaker. I think it's
I enjoy Traffic very much. I enjoy that album. The title track I think is fantastic. I love the way it develops. It goes on for a while, which couldn't make the cut. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Traffic. I'm just struggling to include it in my top prog tracks, top prog groups.
I definitely put my hands up. It was like, it was one of those things that I really wanted to put in there. I think we'll come to an end now because
Andy, I'm going to counter your Traffic with this album which I'm holding up.
So you do this. Yeah. I wanted to put in the notable mentions at the end.
Notable mentions because I'm more of a King Crimson fan. So let me just hold my hand up on that one. And I'm going to go back to my theme of stepping stone albums because King Crimson, Islands. Is Islands their best album? Nah, not for me. Is it one of their most important? Yeah. So this is like the nursery crime argument. So Crim had gone from In the Court, which is amazing. Then they sort of done a sort of like In the Court light with In the Wake of Poseidon. Then they went off into strange, uncharted territory with Lizard, and it's like, whoa, what's going on here? And I think other people were taking the baton that they sort of like passed on with In the Court of the Crimson King, and Crimson were going somewhere else. And I don't think they could have got from Lizard to Lark's Tongues and Aspic, which is one of their very good albums, without going through Islands. So Islands doesn't have many great standout tracks on it for me, but hugely important. And there's a bit of fun, a bit of grit and grind with Ladies of the Road. Some of it meanders a bit. But this was really important for Crimson, I think, to really work out just where they're going. Because they went from this to Lark's Tongues, Stars and Bible Black, and Red, which is a fantastic trilogy of albums, in my opinion. So really important, not their best, but no, if you want to understand how they got to where they got to, essential album, in my opinion. So there's my shout out for the mighty King Crimson.
No, absolutely. And I will take your word for it because it's not my favourite album. It's one of those albums that, again, it's like I've tried to get into it, and it's one of those ones I get a little bit in. I think I don't want to do this anymore. I do like King Crimson, but they're not my favourite bands in all the world. But I mean, there are some staggeringly good King Crimson stuff, and I It's a little bit wishy-washy in places, but we've also got notable mentions. So also this one here, which I think you pulled out as well.
Yeah.
This one is In a Mountain Flame, Mahavishnu Orchestra, and again, it's one of those. Prog does so many different things. There's so many different types of prog, and this sort of jazz fusion, progressive element that came in around about this time and sort of has gone through. I mean, even progressive rock bands of today are influenced by this stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember I did a podcast with John Camp, ex-Renaissance bass player John Camp, and he was talking about doing gigs with the likes of Return to Forever and loving bands like the Mahavishnu. You could see he loved bands like Mahavishnu, and just how impressed he was with these guys. Watching them play, it just blew him away. So there's a lot of love for this sort of jazz fusion stuff. I mean, what do you think of this album?
Oh, I love it. I prefer Birds of Fire, but they're both great albums. People have said to me, "Hey, what's this prog stuff you like, man?" And depending on how I want the conversation to go, I will sometimes put on Birds of Fire. And quite often people will go, "All right, what's on side two?" I think they're fantastic. McLaughlin, great guitarist. That combination, I mean, was it Cobham, wasn't it? McLaughlin, Jan Hammer before he went off to do Miami Vice, Rick Laird, Jerry Goodman. The stuff they pull together, I mean, it's in prog genre style as far as I'm concerned. Fantastic musicianship. Never knew quite where it's going to go next. Really exciting. You feel the energy. I know it's not prog, but one of the other great albums of the year was Who's Next, which to me has got so much energy on it, and the Mahavishnu stuff for me does, particularly with Birds of Fire, but In a Mountain Flame as well. So yeah, big fan of the Mahavishnu lot.
And other albums to sort of mention is things like Ferry Port by Wigwam, really great album. Again, find them. Go on to Spotify or whatever you want to do, and go and find these albums and listen. But Ferry Port was a really good. It was a double album by Wigwam, again released in '71, and I think it's a classic prog album. Incredible album. But one of those albums that just no one ever talks about. So have a look for that one. Journey to the Centre of the Eye.
Nectar,
a great album as well.
Yeah.
These are sort of and also things like the Straubs. The from the Witchwood, the fourth album.
Yes, Witchwood, yeah.
Great album. Hawkwind, In Search of Space.
Yeah. Oh, and this lot of fun as well.
I can't see what that is.
Uriah Heep.
Oh, right, yeah.
Uriah Heep. They brought out 2 albums that year. They brought out Look at Yourself and Salisbury. And they were fun back then. They were experimenting a bit. I love that organ sound that they had. Are they up there my all-time favourites? No, but can I listen to the albums again and again? Absolutely. Take a look at yourself. It's fantastic. I'd recommend this one over Salisbury if people are interested. But July Morning, they still play occasionally in their gigs. Look at Yourself is just a great start to an album. That'll get you up. And what I also loved, Andy, about these albums back in the day is when they do their own sort of like liner notes, when they give you a little bit description about the songs, what it means to them. I've always liked that for some reason. Remember Mick Abrams doing it on the first Bloodwind Pick album and loved that as well, but slightly different style of music there.
No, it's absolutely fantastic. Anyway, listen, we're going to give this to put this to an end now. We've gone through the whole of the 1971 show. Fantastic albums in there, fantastic musicians, all the rest of it. If you want to support us, then go on to YouTube and just search for ProgAxia. So ProgAxia, ProgAxia. You find the YouTube channel and go and subscribe to that and hit the notification bell, because we're going to do loads of these podcasts. So we're going to put them up onto YouTube. We're going on all the major podcast channels now. So go and find your favourite one and search for us, and we're in there as well. But subscribe and comment and share as much as you can, because we need to have this music out there. We need to sort of spread it around as much as possible. We need as much support as we can muster for this stuff. So like it, subscribe, comment, share, do whatever you can to just spread the music, spread the concepts around. So listen, Paul, fantastic.
It's been great fun, mate. Cheers.
Yeah, really good talking about this stuff. And we're going to be doing it again. We've got 1972 to do next, so we'll have a little chat about that. We'll get the albums together, dig all our albums out of our closets and boxes in the loft, and try and get them all packed together again. But it's been great talking to you, and we'll do 1972 next time round.
Prog on.
See you later.
You're listening to the ProgAxia podcast.